Let's jump out to the D&M Leasing Hotline. Welcome to the program. Longtime Tampa Bay Buccaneers general manager and just overall NFL executive and just a overall great human being. Plus, he went to the University of Kansas, so you know he's got to be a good dude. The one, the only Mr. Mark Dominik. And Mark, back in the day, what was trade deadlines like for you?
Yeah, it was a little earlier, but my goal was to make sure that when I was director of pro personnel, to make sure that the general manager was never surprised by a name that he was like, I didn't know that person was on the market. So it was calling the 31 of the clubs and talking to the director of player personnel or director of pro and talking to him about it. As a GM, it was more like, does this trade make sense and what's the reason why we're doing it? Because a lot of times you'll see, don't just do something for the sake of change. Change for the sake of change is a terrible idea. Like, what's the overall thought behind it? And I think you see a little bit of a problem with some of these teams that have, I think, traded pieces away that, you've got to realize you got to fill all these pieces, and getting fourth round and fifth round picks isn't going to help you really rebuild a roster when you give away a guy that's a starter in the National Football League. So I think it's a great opportunity right now because I feel like younger GMs are giving away good players at fourth and fifth round pricing. And I think that's why you saw so many receivers get moved around because the value was too good for them.
Mark, when you initially see this trade for Jonathan Mingo to the Dallas Cowboys for said fourth-round picks that we're referring to, was your initial reaction to how you feel today any different?
No, I mean, I'm kind of twofold on this one, right? I don't disagree with the Cowboys at all. If you had him high on your draft board and he's been, sitting there playing with Bryce Young, and that has been up and down, obviously, so he's never really had a quarterback. But if you liked him on your draft board and you're like, look, we would have taken this guy in the second or third round and we can get him for a fourth on a rookie contract, to me it makes sense. Like, I think that's logical to me, that you don't feel like you're going to find that type of talent in this year's class, which I don't think you will as much. I don't think this wide receiver class is quite as stacked as we've seen the last couple of years. So I kind of like this deal. I think it's a worse deal for the Panthers because they're got to rebuild. Like, the whole roster feels like it needs a makeover. And when you start trading away guys, now they get to be around him every day at practice to see what he's worth, what's he like. But I think for a Mingo, this is like a rejuvenation. So I like this move. And again, this goes into Deontay. I mean, it goes to Hopkins. We've seen all these guys, whether it's, all the different players that have Amari Cooper that have been traded. I think they've been traded at a very good bargain for the clubs that are picking them up.
Mark, and I'll tell you what, it's interesting you say that as far as, you like the way it worked for the Cowboys because, of course, and again, you know how social media works. Unnamed general manager says this was a bad deal, yada, yada. And look, our first inclination is when you see what Mingo's done so far in the first year and a half of his career, you're sitting there thinking to yourself like, but at the same time, too, to your point, I mean, again, he is with the Carolina Panthers. My only concern is with this Cowboys team, you've already had Troy Aikman call this team out as far as the wide receiver group. You've got an offense that's in disarray. And then, oh, by the way, you're not going to have Dak Prescott for, at least the next couple of weeks. We've heard conflicting reports about whether he's on IR or not. What's the, are you worried about what you're bringing him into and how, kind of unstable it is right now in Dallas?
Well, I think you've got a lot of different things going there. I think you touched on it a little bit. One of them is obviously Brandon Cooks isn't going to be there going forward, I don't think, in 2025. It means that Jalen Tolbert hasn't really panned out, I think, the way they were hoping for, or Jalen Brooks. I think you kind of look at all these different players and they're saying, hey, look, we're struggling at that wide receiver room. Again, you look at the draft board in 2025 and you say, this is not the same receiving class that we saw this last year or the year before. So you have to, as a GM, know the value of where the draft class is this year. And so if the Cowboys are thinking, look, I'd really like to draft a young running or receiver, and now I go get a guy that I thought was second-round value that's played in a system that isn't very much exposing whether this guy's a good player or not, I'm going to trust the process that we were going through, why we had him as a second-round pick, and now I can put him in the system. And whether he plays in 2024 or not, I've still got him for 2025 and 2026, which is a long time in NFL life, as you guys know.
Mark, what do you think should be the plan of action for the Dallas Cowboys for the rest of the season? Should they be playing a guy like Trey Lance? Should they be trying to get young talent going? If you were around this team, what would be kind of your MO and your personal advice to where the Dallas Cowboys currently are constructed and how their season has been going?
Well, I think I would let Cooper – I don't think that's what they're going to do, but Cooper Rush needs to play a couple games until we get to the end of November and we see where the Cowboys' record is. And obviously now without Dak Prescott, it might be at least 4 weeks or more. I just want to make sure we're out of the playoff hunt. And I get it. I'm sure everybody's like we are, but you're really not. I don't know if I truly believe the Commanders will keep on this quest. I love Jaden Daniels. I've been very public about he was my rookie of the year before the season started. I think he'll hold on to that. But I just don't know if the Commanders can hold this momentum under Coach Quinn, which I think is great. But it's hard. It's hard to be that good this quickly for 17 weeks. And the Eagles have done a great job, but it's all on Saquon Barkley. If Saquon Barkley goes down with a hamstring or with a small injury, I think the Eagles come back. So I want to see 2 or 3 more weeks, and I want to give Cooper Rush that opportunity because he's been the most experienced. I would say this: if in 2 weeks the Cowboys lose another game or 2, then absolutely Trey Lance needs to go on the football field. You absolutely need to see what this guy looks like. He's been in the system for a while now. What can he do? Because maybe doubtful, but maybe it's a Sam Darnold situation where he just needed a change. He needed a situation. So I think if you lose 2 more games, Trey Lance should play because I think you need to evaluate that position across the board. Whether, Dak Prescott's one thing, but who's 2 and 3, and can we win if Dak Prescott goes down in the future to make sure that we've got a quarterback that we can still go out there and say we got a chance to win the game.
Former Tampa Bay Buccaneer general manager and longtime NFL executive Mark Dominik, who you can find now on SiriusXM, talking all things National Football League, joining us here on the program. Where you've got this has just been one of those years where, and we talked about this going into the season, where you thought, okay, this team's going to go either going to go 12-5 again, and maybe make a run in the playoffs, wink wink, or it's going to be a complete dumpster fire. And unfortunately, we're kind of teetering towards the latter. Part of that is where you had Jerry Jones saying, look, I'm okay with guys being on 1-year deals. Well, that's easy to say when you're a billionaire. Where are you at on having a coach on the hot seat, essentially, for an entire season?
Well, I mean, it's obviously not a great spot that anybody wants to be in because they want to feel comfortable. But Coach Mike has been in this situation before. He's been in San Francisco. He's been in Green Bay. He's been in Dallas. He's handled it and understands that the team needs to come together. Look, losing Coach Quinn, as I think we all know, there's, Coach Zimmer, Coach Quinn are way 2 different type of personalities, in my opinion. And I think that's been a big piece of this is that these guys are like, wait a second, who's this guy? I also feel like Dallas, the team has played more individual football this year than team football. It just feels like the guys are worried about their next contract and maybe not so focused on what's the right responsibility they're supposed to be doing. Clearly, we all know that Micah Parsons was a very difficult loss for this football team. Marshawn Nealon looked like he was really going to come along. The pass rushing part of this team really got hurt. Sam Williams, as you guys obviously know, there's certainly been the injury problem that we've seen with Deron Bland, et cetera. But I think it's been more of that they just haven't bought in fully with the way that they're getting coached from Coach Zimmer. And I think with Coach Mike, I think that it's, I don't think there's a problem. I think Coach Mike would take it like, hey, if everything goes the way I think it can, I might get a big, huge, 3 or 4 year contract extension. If it doesn't go well, then so be it. I've been in the league for a long time. I still might get another opportunity. I'm not against it. The thing I sit there and look at the Cowboys is there's a lot of movement in the offensive line. They got 2 young guys out there, BB's played up and down, but solid. Tyler Guyton, obviously, has been banged up a little bit, but I see a lot of good traits out of him as well. I had the Cowboys in the playoffs. I'm just as shocked, I think, as everybody, and I thought that they had a chance to fight for the division, the conference title. But things have just been so south, and the games have gotten away from them. It's just been a very ugly and frustrating year, and I would have not predicted this at all.
I'm going to pivot to the state of the NFL as far as young teams are concerned, especially young quarterbacks. When you look at the Chicago Bears with Caleb Williams, when you look at the Commanders with Jaden Daniels, Houston Texans with our boy CJ Stroud, what do you make of these? You talked about these young GMs now kind of building teams where they get these offensive skill positions, building out the offense, but at the expense of the offensive line. We see all those names I just mentioned. Offensive line hasn't been great either this year or in the past years. What do you kind of make of this new roster building of getting them receivers, getting them running backs rather than O-linemen?
I'm not a huge fan of that, right? Signing offensive linemen, draft offensive linemen is never sexy, right? It's just like, oh, well, the draft day grades after the draft, it's like, well, he took a left tackle and a right guard. That's a C, right? But if you take a wide receiver and a running back, it's an A+. This is really exciting. But you've got to have these offensive linemen. And so I'm a huge believer in getting your offensive line. I think the Commanders worked on trying to improve it. And one of the things that's helpful for them is Sam Cosmi has been able to stay on the football field. Obviously, Tyler Biotish is very familiar with Coach Quinn and is a very consistent center. You know what you're going to get each and every week out of him. So I think the Commanders did a pretty good job. I think you have to protect the quarterback. To me, you find the quarterback, you protect the quarterback, then you attack the quarterback. That's kind of the logic that I always thought of as a general manager, because if I don't have him here on Sunday, that quarterback, what's the point of having him in the first place? So I know that, it is sexy to go get the skill guys around it. I would have told you this, though, and I said this very publicly here in Nashville around the Titans. I wouldn't have taken Latham. I said all along I'd take Brock Bowers. He's a different type of player. I like Latham, but the tackle market was much deeper than the tight end market. And, so I think you've got to really look at what's the value of this guy, knowing I've got to protect the quarterback, but how weak we are at that position. And Brock Bowers has proven out to be, right up there with probably, first, second, third rookie of the year possibilities.
I'm glad you mentioned Tennessee because when you look at Tennessee, and then I'll tell you what, just using the two examples you used, Brock Bowers, who went to the Raiders, and then we look at Tennessee, you got a Raiders team that has no quarterback, right? I mean, Aiden O'Connell is, he'll be a career backup, and that's exactly what Gardner Minshew is. Then you go to Tennessee, and, I hate to say that Will Levis isn't going to be that guy, but I'm going to go ahead and say it. Will Levis isn't going to be that guy. If you're a GM for either one of those teams, are you telling your staff, look, we've got to go find a quarterback if we're going to get this thing turned around?
Well, I do think Callahan's probably thinking that way. He's like, okay, Rand drafted Will Levis. I think that was a fight between him and Vrabel on draft day.
Okay.
I think that was part of the breakdown of what happened between the two. And now Will Levis has been out there. The problem, I agree with you, though, I feel like Will Levis has melted down too many times. And I know he's not out there right now. It's Mason Rudolph. But whenever I saw Will Levis out there, it just felt like it all looks good. Adonis Spotty, all those kind of good things. But the consistency is just, it's not there, fellas. Yeah. It's just not happening. There's too many bad, ugly plays that where I look at it and go, look, we've tried the Will Levis thing. It was a second-round pick. It didn't work out. Let's move. I think for the Titans, they've got to decide if they want a George Fineman veteran or if they feel like, they can get one in the draft. This is not the same draft class.
Right.
There will not be 6 quarterbacks by any stretch going in the first 12 picks of this draft class at the quarterback spot. The Raiders are a unique spot, right? Desmond Ridder comes in, has the nice, kind of showing as they bench Minshew again. The problem for Aiden O'Connell is finally, he did a good job his rookie year. Antonio Pierce kept the job because of how good Aiden O'Connell played, and then he breaks his thumb, right? In the, 10th throw or 11th throw of the game. And so now he's out for another probably 2 or 3 more weeks, so they're not going to know what Aiden O'Connell is, but they're going to have to keep moving. I don't know if Coach Pierce is going to make it. He might be a one-and-done coach.
Really?
I don't love that at all, but it just feels like with Luke Getsy and not knowing, starting Minshew in the first place to me was a huge mistake. You start Aiden O'Connell, you find out everybody knows what Minshew is. He's a really good number 2 who can get you through some games, but he's not a guy that you're going to go put the whole season on and say, let's go back and get to 10 wins. I don't think he is, but I like Gardner as a person. But Aiden O'Connell, you're like, he got you the job, right? You won all these games because of Aiden O'Connell. So put him out there, find out if he can't do it, great. It's kind of like you talked about the Cowboys. Like, can Cooper Rush do this? Where are we at with Trey Lance? Well, that's what they need to do with Aiden O'Connell, but now they still don't even know. So I think the Raiders are more than likely going to, Aiden will get his shot, but only get like 4 games. But I have a feeling the Raiders are more likely to draft a guy. I think you'll see the Titans be more aggressive and go get a guy because I think Rand Carthon realizes if I don't get a quarterback in here next year to win, I'm probably out.
All right, get you out of here with this. You hired Raheem Morris once upon a time way back in 2009, and I'll tell you what, this guy's been through the the NFL ringer, so to speak, and here he is now in Atlanta. He's got that team rolling right now. How good does it feel for you to see Raheem having this success? And I've asked this before of other guys. Does this lend itself to NFL teams saying, okay, there are guys that we can give second, third chances to, especially, or in his case, second chance, when, if a guy got a job young, took his lumps, did his thing, and then can come around and have more success later on?
Well, I'm very happy for Coach Morris, for sure. For Raheem, still a friend of mine, known him forever, obviously. He was 34. We got hired on the exact same day at about a half an hour apart, right?
Okay.
So it wasn't like but we knew each other. I think the ownership thought, well, Mark knows Raheem. I'm 37. Raheem's 34. You guys go be the head coach and GM. That's how it actually works, and it's fine. But when Raheem was head coach of the Bucs, he was very young for the position, and we remodeled the whole team and went way too young, cut out way too much veteran leadership out of the locker. We just made a lot of mistakes, but that was kind of what the mindset was. I have been saying for 5-6 years, I hope Raheem gets another opportunity. Didn't know where it was going to come from. Like you said, He's been on the offensive side. He's been on the defensive side. He's been a coordinator. He was due another opportunity. I'm happy he's back to Atlanta. I think that's really good what he's done. And, I got to give Terry Fontenot credit. The Michael Penix thing, I'll still scratch my head. We'll see how good Michael Penix is. But the Kirk Cousins things made tons of sense. And Darnell Mooney was a sleeping, receiver in Chicago who's really productive. They've done some really good things there to put them in this position to be in first place. So I'm excited for them, and I think this is what Kirk Cousins is always hoping for. And I think that Falcons hold on to this thing. I don't think Tampa Bay is going to be able to come back because Tampa Bay can't get healthy anymore, right?
Yeah.
Today, even Baker Mayfield wasn't practicing. McMillan wasn't practicing. I mean, the receiving room is completely wiped out. So they play the 49ers. I think that's going to make a really big gap here, and they've already lost to Atlanta twice. But I'm proud of Raheem. I'm glad he gets the second opportunity. It's great for it, and he's taking advantage of it.
Mark, great stuff from you as always. Real quick, 5 seconds or less. Do we beat Iowa State this weekend?
Gosh. Yeah, I think we're ready for an upset. It's been a very upsetting season, but I think we're ready for an upset.
Can you give Lance maybe when the season's over, maybe give him some DC and OC names? Just saying. I mean,
might drop a couple.
Hey, it's the least we could do. It's the least we could do. Mark,
Amen.
Great stuff from you as always, my friend. We'll do this again soon. Enjoy the football this weekend.
Thanks for having me on, fellas.